Thank you and welcome to everyone watching this video and those viewing the virtual exhibit. I also want to say welcome and a huge thank you to the members of our community, our participants here today who submitted pieces to the exhibit. You will be hearing from each one of them shortly. We at the Sawyer Center are really pleased to open this exhibit in time for Juneteenth celebrations this year. Our hope is that the subject matter will contribute positively to the recognition, celebration, and important discussions that are happening about what Juneteenth represents to the community and to our country as a whole. My name is Ashley Green. I oversee the community partnership team at Brown University's Sawyer Center for Public Service. I'll be moderating this conversation today. This exhibit and the overall project that it's associated with would not have been possible without my colleagues, Georgina Manook, who is the Sawyer Center's Assistant Director for Research and Assessment, as well as my colleague Alexis Takushian, who is our Community Partnership Vista Fellow at the Sawyer Center. I also want to mention that the project is possible through funding support from Brown University's Office of the Provost and their Addressing Systemic Racism Fund. So we are grateful for their funding support for this work. Finally, I'll mention to those of you who are viewing that if you are moved by the exhibit and this conversation, that once the exhibit opens, the Sawyer Center will be reopening its call for submissions to invite folks to submit any additional pieces, art, artifacts, pieces of creative expression that will be added to this exhibit. There will be some opportunities both for the folks that you're seeing here with us and for anyone who decides to submit a piece after today to participate in panel discussions and workshops on and around Brown's campus later in the summer and in the fall. So we hope you'll consider that opportunity as you view the exhibit and as you listen to our participants here today. With that, I'm going to transition to introducing our panelists. I'll go through each of the names and I'll invite folks maybe just to give a little wave as I introduce you, and then we'll move forward to our questions and conversations. First, I want to introduce Nayali Chang. Naya is a multimedia artist and dual degree student at Brown University and the Rhode Island School of Design. Naya submitted the piece called The Moment Times the Movement. Next, I want to introduce Elizabeth DeAndrade Phillips. Liz is a storyteller and artist based in North Providence, and she submitted the piece entitled Can I Be a Princess? Mish is our next participant, and she is an organizer and activist who resides in Providence. She submitted the piece entitled Black. Next, I want to introduce Paige Ron. Paige is a Barrington resident who completed her MSW at Rhode Island College, and Paige submitted the piece entitled When I Dream. Next, Keith Stokes is the vice president of the 1696 Heritage Group. He submitted the piece Rhode Island Slavery Complicity, From Maritime Trade to Textile Manufactories, Negro Cloth. And finally, and certainly not least, I want to introduce Alton Stuckey. Alton is a self-taught artist whose work has been shown widely in Rhode Island, and he submitted the piece entitled Black Lives Matter. So those are our panelists. You'll hear a much, much fuller introduction of themselves and their work from them. And so that's where I'll start. Turning to you, Naya, to kick us off. Would you tell us more about yourself, describe your piece and what inspired it, and tell us why you were moved to submit to this exhibit?
Sure. So as mentioned earlier, I'm an undergraduate student right now studying history at Brown, and I'm studying furniture design at RISD, but outside of my design practice, I like to maintain a fine arts practice. So I created this piece with a micro grant from the Brown Arts Initiative, which came out last summer to support protest art in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. So I created 6 pieces. They're multimedia paintings. So all of them have kind of a collage format, which I can go through more later, and have different mixed media elements on top of acrylic paint. And I wanted them to evoke the protest signs that I was seeing in the news and also just in cities all around the US. What I wanted to do when I first applied for the protest grant was to make something that was somehow publicly facing. I think a lot of fine arts work is very much confined to the gallery space. So something I've been thinking about a lot is how I can have my fine arts work be in a more public domain. Because of COVID, it was kind of hard to figure out if there'd be a place that I could put them up somewhere. So when I saw this Swearer Center calling for this online exhibit, I decided to submit to hope to reach a larger audience and also to be able to use my pieces in some sort of an educational setting. Yeah, that's public facing artwork is something I'm very passionate about. So I'm glad to be a part of this exhibit.
Thank you so much, Naya. Liz, same question. Tell us about yourself, your piece, and why you chose to submit.
All right, so I chose a piece. I'm a photographer. I have a basic 9-to-5 job, and I'm finishing up my degree now at College Unbound. So what inspired me to write my poem and take this picture was about 4 years ago. I took a picture of my niece. She was so obsessed with princesses. So I took a picture of her and I loved it. It's actually the face of my photography. And then what had happened, what inspired me to do the poem was that she came home one day and was questioning why she didn't look like a princess, why her hair wasn't straight, and why she didn't have, a lighter skin, and her face was just different than normal princesses because a girl in her school had mentioned to her that she wasn't a princess. So, obviously I was furious. So we had this hour conversation, and then it just inspired me just to write. So I wrote a piece, basically going about our conversation, and that's how it came out with "Can I Be a Princess?" I know you did ask a little bit about myself, but that's what kind of inspired me. I kind of went outside the box with entering in this exhibit. I've never submitted anything as an artist. This is my first time, and I was pretty excited. One of my professors at College Unbound asked me to, submit it, and it was just a good piece. He thought, just because it's about anti-racism and culture, and I'm all about culture, and I have this motto that I feel like I'm going to save the world with art. So that's basically me. I'm Liz, and that's my piece.
Liz, I can't tell you how thrilled and fortunate we are that you chose to step outside your comfort zone with us in this exhibit. Mish, would you tell us a bit about yourself and about your piece?
Yeah, so I work at AS220, which is a anti-racist arts organization. We are doing a lot of work with anti-racism as an organization, which made me really dig deep into myself about what that means for me. Prior to working at AS220 2 years ago, I had no idea what that was, to be anti-racist. It's different from being, not racist. Being anti-racist is like actively going against people who are racist, or trying to teach people about racism. So I also am like heavy in my communities. I coach cheerleading for the Intruders, the West Elmwood Intruders. I work at Noel Academy as a teacher there. So this piece was inspired by a project that we had to do. I also go to College Unbound like Liz. In our art and protest class, we had to protest something that we were passionate about in an artistic way. And I'm extremely passionate about women and femmes of color. I want to elevate them in every sense, in every way that I can. So my spoken word is about the stereotype that media and society puts on women of color. And it shifts into like women of color and femmes that I know in my life personally who very loudly contradict those stereotypes. And just wanted to elevate them in the most artistic way possible. So I put together a video of pictures from media, and then it shifts into pictures of people in my life as the poem shifts. So it's like, it's multimedia, but it was like super fun to do. And I forgot the other question. What made me submit this? like Liz, I've never submitted anything like in my life. I think everybody's an artist, but I never thought of myself as an artist that would be displaying anything. And I also got the call from a professor, Carmen, at College Unbound, and was like, you need to submit this. Like, the world needs to see this. And I was like, all right, if you think so, I'm gonna submit it. We'll see what happens. And then I got that email. So it just gave me this boost. So thank you for the opportunity, for sure.
You are very welcome. And it feels like at this point, I should say a special thanks to our friends at College Unbound who are encouraging and bringing wonderful artists like you all into our sphere. Keith, I wonder if you might, tell us a bit about yourself, your piece, and why you chose to submit.
Thank you. I'm Keith Stokes, and I'm with the 1696 Heritage Group, and we do research and historical recovery for historical organizations, not only across the country, but I've done a lot of work in the West Indies and West Africa. But most importantly, my own family, my kids are 9th generation Newporters. I mean, we trace ourselves back some of the earliest arrivals and settlers in Newport, in Rhode Island, in America. And we're just fortunate we own a large number of family heirlooms dating back to the 18th century. And what's been most important to us is it represents our family, who were a part of the early families who lived, worked, and worshiped, but as racial and religious minorities. So this particular piece and work was an opportunity for me to share something very personal, a family heirloom, but also historical work that I've been involved in for a number of years in interpreting the history of African heritage people through the slave trade and eventually freedom in Rhode Island. And one piece of the work provides a storyboard of 84 actual Rhode Island manufacturing mills that were actively engaged in the production of what is called Negro cloth. Negro cloth is a very coarse woolen item that was produced largely in Rhode Island and then shipped back to the antebellum South to be worn by enslaved African heritage people, particularly in the lower South, between 1820 and the advent of the Civil War. The item that I also have, which is very important to us, is an heirloom that's been passed on many generations in our family. It's my great-great-grandmother's slave doll. This doll was made from the actual clothing, the Negro cloth, of an enslaved woman in her household when she was a little girl in 1830. The actual physical doll is made from her clothing, which includes her apron, her waistcoat, her head wrap, her pantaloons. And it really represents to me not only a physical reminder of the complicity of the actual clothing the enslaved Africans made, not in the South, but in the North, and particularly New England, Rhode Island, but it also reminds me that slavery is not a distant memory. It's something that, for at least my family, we've known about, we've understood, and we've passed on every generation to cherish the memories of our ancestors before us.
Keith, thank you so much. What an astonishing and critical bit of history, not both in the records, but also in the physical artifact as well. Thank you for sharing it with us. Alton, I'm wondering if you, as others before you have, tell us a bit about yourself and your piece, and tell us why you decided to submit to this exhibit.
Okay, I'm Alton Stuckey. I grew up in the South Side, and then I started doing artwork when I was 14, and then it built up from there. My piece is called Black Lives Matter. I wanted to get it to submit it to let others think about how others treat others. And me, I decided in the near future to talk about having a Black Lives Matter Center in the years to come, not like right away, but in the future, to help others to stop this racism.
You can talk about your experience.
My experience is learning how to do other art from drawing, learning how to paint, learning how to make stuff, learning how to do lots of things, lots of things in art. And my last subject was learning how to do faces. First, I've been learning them how to do freehand, and then I learned how to do them from pictures, and then I thought of a technique of doing drawings.
And talk about who you represented in
I
your drawing.
I represent myself
In your drawing.
in my drawing.
And who else?
Those are the folks that love my portraits.
Is that right?
That I do artwork. That I do artwork. It makes me feel relaxed. It like heals me. It keeps me away from all this other stuff that be going on in the world, and that helps.
That's really wonderful, Alton. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate your sentiment
You're more
about
than
healing.
welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate your sentiment about healing, both in terms of healing yourself and also, you know, the ability, as you said, to encourage folks to treat each other better, which I really think is about healing our society in a lot of ways. Thanks, Alton. So for our panelists, and please, and anyone who's sort of compelled, jump in first. I'm wondering if one or more of you would describe either your creative or
Ashley?
decision-making. Sorry.
Has Paige gone?
Paige, I'm so sorry. Paige, please, I apologize. Tell us about yourself and your piece, and tell us why you decided to submit. My apologies.
That's okay. So I live in Barrington. I've lived here for roughly 6 years. My kids go to school here. My background is in social work, criminal justice, and English literature. So it's kind of all over the place. My piece, When I Dream, it started off as a speech for a rally for somebody that was, I don't necessarily want to use their name, but they were dealing with some racism in the town, and listening to them talk about what was happening to them, and kind of realizing that this was the environment that my kids were in, I just felt very compelled to write something. And at first I wrote like a 6-page speech, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to read this at the rally and not dissolve into tears and be super emotional. So I decided instead to get rid of it and start over, and I wrote a poem. And I used to write poems when I was younger, and this poem just came to me, and I just kind of wanted it to express how I felt about racism in general, how I felt that you know, the kids in our community were being exposed to racism in the community. And I also wanted to speak from a place of white privilege, and to say, you know, that I knew what my white privilege was, and I knew that it really wasn't fair that white privilege even existed, that, you know, that my own neighbor had to go through so many tribulations when, you know, I didn't have to go through things like that. You know, I don't have to raise my sons to raise their hands and be nervous around police officers. So there were just a lot of emotions that came into play. And I wanted it to be just something to say, I see you and I hear you, and I will never know what it's like, but I stand with you. So that's why I wrote it. And then somebody one of my friends had posted on Facebook about submitting pieces, and I just figured, why the heck not? So I submitted it.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Paige, and thank you for that sort of note and framing. You know, what I hear is sort of around allyship and how, among other things, and how you experience that. Thank you. So I'm wondering if a few of you or each of you could tell us about your creative or decision-making process in selecting the piece that you submitted. And some of you have already touched on it, but perhaps if you would elaborate in selecting the piece that you submitted, or if, you know, this is a part of your regular practice. What is your creative or decision-making process around your work or your art look like more generally? Naya, could I put you on the spot maybe to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, so this piece for me really rose out of the first couple weeks of protest right after the murder of George Floyd. And what my process really starts from a lot of reading and research at the beginning. So the research is obviously not that difficult in this case because newspapers every day were covering the latest protests, the latest instances of police brutality, all these different things. And I wanted to, in my piece, touch on something more specific than just protests are happening. So I chose in the 6 different pieces, 6 different facets of the movement that I saw happening. So for example, one of them is about these reports of like police brutality coming at peaceful protesters, especially in New York City, which we were reading about a lot then. Another one was just the complexity and like absurdity almost of this happening during a pandemic, and how people were concerned about going to these protests, but at the same time, you can't put off a protest until a more convenient time. So from doing a lot of research and reading and trying to understand myself, what was going on and what was going on around me, I developed this collage process, which I mentioned before. So I started with just cardboard, mainly as a homage to the signs I was seeing all around like my own town and newspaper coverage. I added on top of that a lot of the most affecting phrases that I heard and that were gaining popularity. So I can't breathe was one of them. No justice, no peace was another. There was a lot. I chose 6 of the ones. From there, I took clippings of newspapers that I was reading and kind of collaged that on top of there. And then I added my own painted vignettes of scenes that were going on and yeah, like the themes that were happening during this time. And then on top of that, I added some mixed media elements because I think mixed media elements make a piece a lot more dynamic. And also it makes the piece a little less traditional. It makes it a little bit more of an artifact than just a painting. So that was the process of like the actual creation of the piece. But yeah, in general, my creative process is a back and forth between making the actual art and learning more as I go. I mentioned I'm a history major at Brown, so being really rooted in my sources and like real accounts of people is really important to me in my work. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to share a bit about their process?
I could hop in. When I start writing poetry, I literally just start writing. I just write and write and write. And I started writing from a place of like, what does it mean to be a woman or femme in Providence, Rhode Island, of color right now? And this was right after summer, right after all the protesting, right after like eyes were opening and conversations were being had. So I just started writing, and then I started thinking about my encounters with racism throughout my life, and then the women in the video, the women and femmes that I know, I started having conversations with them about their experiences. and more so how they overcame those experiences. And then I started thinking about how I seen them in a completely different lens than what we see on like movies and videos and music videos and social media. So I started to like play around with like the contrast aspect of like the two worlds, like the world I live in as a woman of color and the world society is trying to paint us to be. Um, and it was like very emotional. It was a very emotional process for me. It took me the whole semester to write that poem, literally the whole semester. Because every time I started, it was like I had to stop because I had to really like gather myself, because that anti-racist work in general is just very emotional, very heavy, very like just tough to do, but it's so necessary. And so that my process is always first just write what I feel, and then similar to Naya, just getting like facts from other people, hearing stories, listening to experiences and trying to incorporate that into my work, and then like give my perspective of those experiences and kind of just boil it all up into this pretty little spoken word.
Thank you, Mish. I saw some nodding from Paige and Liz as Mish began to describe just starting to write as a part of the process. I wonder if either of you want to speak or to build on that in terms of your process as well.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on
Oh.
that. Oh, sorry, Paige. I'm so sorry.
It's
You wanna go?
okay. It's okay. You go ahead.
Yeah, I can relate a lot to what Mish said, and I actually saw her piece. It's a beautiful piece. I was in that class with her, and she had me in tears, man. That was a good piece. So I could relate to that because I'm the same way. Sometimes, you go in a dark place, or when things have happened to you, or you see things around you, writing helps. Just like Alton said earlier too about like that's your happy place, with the arts. So I feel that way, and with me, my creative process. When I did my piece, I felt like I did it through writing, I did it through photography. And what I wanted to get out of my piece is to empower young women of all colors, Black, brown, you know what I mean? I sometimes also feel that we also get racism within our own culture sometimes, because I'm Cape Verdean. So Cape Verdean people, you could be black, you could be super light skinned. So sometimes I'll even get it from my own people because I'm light skinned, and I'll say I'm African, and then they're like, no, you're not. Then what am I? So that kind of inspired me with my piece. And I do truly believe that there's still kindness, as cliche as it sounds. I feel like, there's hope for this world. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but it was following about writing. But yeah, I really think writing is what helps me get through this. And I feel like with the arts, we can really change the thought process of a lot of people, just by what we say in our words, spoken word, photography, drawings. So that's my part. Paige, take over from there.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. For me, my piece was actually really easy to write in some ways, and in other ways incredibly hard because at the time that I was writing this, I was meeting all these new people in the community, and we were all trying to come together to rally behind this person or a group of people who were feeling very small at the time. The actions of other people in this town had made this group of people feel very, very small. And I think for me, I tried to think about, if I was in their shoes, what would I want my neighbor or my friend to do to show support? And I had spent so many years growing up in a very small town in Connecticut where there was a lot of sort of undercurrents of racism, but nothing like what was happening here. And it was like a flip just went off and I was like, I need to do something. I need to say something. I need people, you know, that I care about and love to know that they're not alone, and that was the big thing for me, was that I wanted this person and their family to know that they had people standing with them, that it wasn't all the people in this town. Not everybody here is racist, that they, you know, that we could come together and try to show them that they had a little bit of a wall of friendship, so to speak. But so for me, it was started out writing a really long-winded speech that I knew halfway through people were going to be like, okay, come on, get on with it. And then I moved into a more poetry field, and it just came out, it just flowed. It was very, very emotional, though, very emotionally based. I had to practice it quite a bit before I actually spoke, because I'm not a huge fan of speaking in front of people. And every time I tried to like speak it in front of my family or anybody, I would just start crying. So it was really hard, but I was able to get through it and not have my heart come flying out through tears. So yeah.
Thank you, Paige. Alton, I think you were starting to share something with us earlier. Did you want to chime in here?
Yes. My artwork, like my Black Lives Matter, I decided to think about all Blacks all over the world, not just in the US, all over. Like take like one face from each area of the globe, and draw it on that poster in front of a brick background. My idea of coming up with a poster like that. So
Kim, how did you come up with that idea though, from what experiences of yours?
I thought of it from my head, and then I came up with that idea. Just doing all different faces from all over the world, even some with disabilities, like one in a wheelchair, one holding a cane.
Why? Why was that important for you to put in your piece?
Because not only they do it to normal Blacks, they do it to ones with disabilities. And I when I was young, I used to get bullied a lot because of my disability and my color.
So that was important to show that in your piece.
And that was important to show my piece. And I hope every one of you on the screen saw it. And how do you feel about it?
I don't know if you can see, you're getting a lot of love and applause from the other folks on the screen. We definitely saw that, and that came through, Alton. You raise another hugely important point about representation.
I'd like to say something else.
Oh, please.
Yeah. The only reason why I say these things, because God made us for a specific reason, not for bullying, not for all this other stuff, but to get along, share your artwork, and just enjoy yourself. That's how I see life, and I love working with color as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Alton. So many hugely important notes in that sentiment. So actually, Alton, I think you provide us a really wonderful segue just to sort of step back and think about this project. So the theme of this exhibit is anti-Black racism, history, current realities, and imagining an anti-racist future. And that includes a global anti-racist future, as you raise. This isn't just about the realities of it in this country, but everywhere. But I'm wondering if a few of you can speak to what you see as the role of art and artifacts and creative expression, perhaps, in addressing racism. And Keith, if I might tap you, you submitted an artifact which, as you shared, has significant historical significance, certainly to your family, and even if with you sharing it with us, I would think to a sort of community at large and to Rhode Island's history at large. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think artifacts might hold particular power to convey critical messages on topics like racism?
My general sense is I think art and certainly historical interpretation should challenge our own entrenched ways of thinking as a people and as a society. And what I tried to do was convey in this that you really can't begin to have racial reconciliation until you have racial recognition. And I wanted to use this piece and other interpretations that I'm involved in to bring to life the history of African heritage people, not as simply chattel property or ghost historical past, but flesh and blood human beings. And one of the things that I try to convey in this exhibit is the fact that slavery is not Black history. Black history is how our African heritage ancestors survived and thrived despite enslavement. And this doll was owned by my great-great-grandmother, an African heritage woman in the 1830s, who survived slavery and thrived despite it and raised a family and contributed to her community. So there's a whole story behind the institution that we have an obligation today to tell and to present, because again, the more that we can enlighten non-people of African heritage, and particularly our allies, to our humanity, the more we can bring them to the table to assist us and for us to obtaining our rightful place as free, equal Americans, regardless of race or ethnicity or religious orientation or sexual orientation. All of us as equal Americans.
Thank you, Keith. Does anyone else want to share sort of their thinking about the place of art, or really any other sort of mode of creative expression in this work?
I wanted to add something just because what Keith said just moved me so much, because something as a white person growing up that I feel that I have been robbed from is the actual history of Black people. We're taught simply about slavery. We're not taught about everything else. And I think that's what I'm so upset about, is that there's a whole history that needs to be taught to future generations that hasn't been taught. And we need to fight to have that history taught so that our kids can acknowledge and say, that was a horrible, horrible thing. And that's not how we should be living our lives. So I really, really liked what Keith said, because that's exactly how I've been feeling. And I've been doing so much of my own research because of the events that transpired this past summer and this past year here in our town. It really moved me to be like, I'm sitting here advocating, but I need to know all of the history. So as much as I don't have a ton of time, because I'm constantly dealing with my crazy children and trying to figure out what I'm doing outside of being a mom, that's what I've been wanting to do, is just find the research. And I had a friend actually give me a copy of a New York Times series that was done that explained a lot of history. And I'm still trying to dig more and find out more. So thank you, Keith, for bringing that up, because that is exactly what needs to happen.
I can hop in real quick if that's okay. I think the role of art is to help people who see only in Black or only in white to see orange and red and purple and yellow. Like, art is a universal language, and it speaks to people who aren't able to understand like like academic language all the time. Like art is a way that people communicate. And it's not necessarily, you know, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, art is a universal language, and I think it speaks to people who don't always speak in a scholarly way. And you don't always need words. Sometimes it's visual, and sometimes it's not. But the role of artists and creatives is to recreate the world. That's what we do. We're the ones the world looks to when we need new answers or new ways of doing things. I think artists are always at the front of that. Yeah.
I can add in something really quick, which is I definitely agree with what Mish was saying. I think art can take what the viewer might know or might be aware of and then really make them feel it. I think reading a lot of news stories or doing research, all these kind of, like Mish said, more academic disciplines can be very numbing, which isn't to say they aren't important, but I think like Keith was saying too, they can dilute some of the humanity of actual people, actual Black people, their experiences. So I think art can make have a much more visceral effect on the viewers than just like a fact sheet or a written account can.
Thank you, Naya. I'll put one final question to the group then. And you know, if everyone can share a little bit, we'd be grateful. So my question to you would be, if you would say in one-ish sentence, what is the main thing that you want people who see your piece to take away from it? The primary takeaway you want folks to have. And Paige, I see your hand, so why don't you go first?
Hope for change.
Thank you.
I don't want to tell people what to see, Ashley. I want them to see it and tell me what they see. What are you interpreting from this piece? I think for me to tell them what they see is counterproductive. I think they need to see it for themselves.
Thank you.
I want my piece to have young women of all walks of life, to just learn to embrace themselves and their culture and not be afraid of what they look like or if they have something different than someone else. Just embrace who you are and love yourself. That's what I want my piece to do.
My piece. My piece, I wanted to say, Black Lives Matter. All, even those with disabilities, those with other abilities. It's not just Blacks alone. It could be whites too, or any other skin color. I think of people all over the world. I even pray for everyone on this planet. What we just went through with this COVID, and it's now almost completely over. We just got notice under our door this morning saying those that got their shots don't have to wear their mask anymore. But I'm just gonna hang on to mine just in case, because those that did not get their shots have to wear theirs still. But I'm just gonna continue on doing what I gotta do with my life, as well as and continue thinking about everyone all over the globe, everyone. Not just Blacks alone, whites, it could be anybody from a different nationality. And I say that artwork brings people together, and then it also makes people happy. And it causes others that want to ask questions, and then I can answer them and get them involved. And just like I said, I also like working with color. I like to mix colors. I like to blend, all this other stuff. I like to make stuff out of materials, recyclable stuff. So that's just about me. And I also like to go to church, which I haven't been going in a while, but I'm gonna start going next week.
Thank-
All I can say are these last words. God bless everyone, and I hope you continue doing the same like I'm doing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alton. Keith, Naya, do you want to take us home with what you hope a takeaway will be for those who see?
Sure, I can jump in. I just want viewers to remember and reflect on what it was like to be an American in the early 2020s, when there was this palpable energy that so long as we have commitment that we might be able to make real change.
I'll just add that I simply want people to recognize that Black history also matters.
And so on that note, I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you for, again, your willingness to create and to share these pieces that are so critical and personal and in many ways emotional for you and for your families and for your histories. We're really grateful to be able to have them as part of the exhibit. We really look forward to, in the coming months, having more opportunity to hopefully have FaceTime with each of you to learn about you, your work, and it's important, and continue the critical discussion around these topics. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to everyone who's viewing the exhibit and who's viewing this conversation. If there are any final sentiments that any member of our panel would like to share, you're welcome to do so. If not, we'll close. Thank you so much.